is the Accidental Safety Pro, brought to you by Vivid Learning Systems and the Health and Safety Institute, episode number 16. My name is Jill James, Vivid's Chief Safety Officer, and today I'm joined by Harold, who is a retired safety and training professional, joining us from his home in Pennsylvania. Harold, welcome so much to the show.
Oh, thank you, Jill. It's quite an honor to be here today, and I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, well, Harold, you are the first person that we're interviewing on the podcast who is retired in the safety profession. How long have you been officially retired?
Well, it's been about a year and a half at this point in time. I worked for, my career was 35 and a half years, so
Wow.
I've been out now, like I say, almost 2 years.
And so have your safety eyes lessened their acuity, or are you still noticing everything around you like the rest of us?
I think if anything, maybe they're even a little more intense, because I find myself, as you would imagine, I have quite a extensive list of things I want to get done around my house and my property and some other places like that. And of course, now I'm starting to get back into some physical labor. And with that, of course, you've got the safety aspect. So yeah, I look at ladders differently now, and all those different things.
Isn't
Yep.
that the case? I was at my gym this morning and lifting weights, and I was looking at some racking that's that holds the weights up, and I had noticed that one bolt wasn't in a place where there would be a space for a bolt. And I was doing this partner workout, and I said to this woman I was lifting weights with, who's also a paramedic, I said, oh, there's a missing bolt in that thing. And I said, I just can't turn it off. Like, I can't turn my eyes off from noticing these things. And she said, gosh, it's got to be so annoying to be you. And I said, my eyes just spot these things, I can't help it. And it sticks with us for a lifetime, right?
Yeah, I know exactly where you're coming from. Like when I'm driving, I see other drivers doing things, and of course, myself doing some things sometimes, or even like when I drive through a work zone, I'll be looking at that, because it's kind of one of the areas where, I had some responsibility when I was in my job, and, I'll be looking at a work zone. It's like, oh, they're not using the right sign there. They're not using it properly, that type of thing. But my wife says, just drive through, forget about it. Don't worry about it.
But it's like, I can't turn it off.
It's hard to do.
Right. So 35 and a half years, Harold, that's a long time in a career. That's wonderful. First of all, congratulations. Congratulations for serving the industry and our practice for that long, and for getting to a point where you can enjoy retirement. So congratulations to you, and thank you for the work. Yeah.
Thank you, Joe. I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah. So take us back to 35 and a half years ago. How on earth did you wind up in the safety field? Where were you at the time, and how did you find your way into it?
How did I end up where I am today, huh?
Yeah.
Well, as we all have, there's many twists and turns in my life, and you look back and you think, well, if I just would have gone left as opposed to right at this one juncture, I would have ended up here as opposed to there. But through the whole time, I can say I've had no regrets of any decisions that I've made or anything. Basically, just to kind of start from the beginning, well, I'll start at college. That's probably a good place to start, because usually that's where most people, their future kind of gets formed when they're in their college years. And I graduated from Shippensburg University. It's a state university within the Pennsylvania university system. And I had a major in biology and a minor in chemistry. Now, what my goals, at least what I thought my goals were at that time, was I would have liked to have worked for like a fish and game commission, something like that, or get into the environmental field. And unfortunately, as we all find out from time to time, when I graduated, and that was in 1981, by the way, so many moons ago, there's most of the federal and state agencies that did that type of work, they it was a period of time where they had hiring freezes on and that
Yeah.
type of thing. So,
Right.
okay, so I on the job search as we would do when we graduate from college, and I actually became aware of a chemist position at a nuclear power plant. Now,
Mm.
never in my wildest dreams did I ever think that I would work or even want to work as a chemist at a at a,
Yeah.
a foreboding
Right.
nuclear power plant.
Sounds
But
kind of like your parents might go, "What?"
exactly,
Hmm.
exactly. But it's like, okay, so let's pursue this. Let's see what's available there. So I
Hmm.
actually went and I interviewed and see here's where my minor in chemistry paid off for me because they offered me a position as a chemist.
Wow.
So I started working at this nuclear power plant,
Hmm.
and I was in that chemist position for about 2 years, worked rotating shifts, was exposed to
Mm.
all the Nuclear Regulatory Commission regulations and procedures and all that
Yeah.
very very strict
Yeah.
formal um, structure that was there, which was good. I mean, that was a good thing for me because throughout the rest of my life, I kind of kept going back to some of the practices that I learned there. So I was in that position for about 2 years. Really enjoyed it. I
Hmm.
love doing that type of thing. Working in the laboratory as a chemist and all that.
Hmm.
Well, after about 2 years of that, I was offered a supervisory position in that same group, which was that was quite an eye opener there because I was like working with peers one day, and the next day I was their
Yeah.
supervisor.
And you're
Okay,
in your early 20s, I bet.
I was,
Yeah.
yeah. I started
Hmm.
there when I was like 22, so
Hmm.
now I'm like 24 and I'm
Yeah.
supervising these people who the day before, I was a coworker with. So
Hmm.
that was that was quite an education for me, and you know, made it through it. Again, that was the type of thing that it was a good learning opportunity, and that
Yeah.
certainly helped me out. As I went through the rest of my
And
career
right.
too.
And so, Harold, what was it like, when you said it was a learning opportunity when all of a sudden overnight essentially you become the supervisor? Yeah, what was that like? Was it challenging, or did you immediately feel like some sort of shift in a power structure? And yeah, right? Like
Yeah.
what? Mm-hmm.
Well, it was kind of a peculiar time, I guess I'll say, because it's like some of certainly the vast majority of my not now my employees who were before, my coworkers, they accepted me, they congratulated me, and all that type of thing. But there were a few who, felt they should have had that position. So,
Mm,
and
mm-hmm.
that wasn't something that went away overnight. In fact, I was in that position for I guess about maybe 5 years or so,
Wow.
and that never really went away with some people. They always
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't a certainly it wasn't an adversarial working relationship, but there was always that in some folks. It's like, well, that should have been me at that point in time. They
Yeah.
wouldn't express that to me,
Right, right,
but of
right.
course, it was just kind of always there. But
Mm-hmm.
but it was a very very positive experience. And the
Hmm.
fact, when I got into the as a supervisor, that's when I really started concentrating more on the safety aspect because as a chemist working in the lab, going out, taking samples, going into radiological areas and all that type of thing, I was certainly well aware of safety, but it
Mm-hmm.
was really my safety.
Right.
I was responsible for my safety, and that's really pretty much the extent of what I really was concerned about. But now, as a supervisor, I had all these people that were working for me.
Yeah.
I had at that point in time, I think about 18 to 20 folks that reported to me. And
Hmm.
now, I was responsible for their safety.
Yeah, your circle widened, not just from an introspective position like some of us experience when we're in our early 20s, but now, oh man, there's people
Right.
on my watch and I have to be concerned about them.
right. So it was a
Yeah.
it was a it was a maturing process for me. It was quite the eye opener for me that now, I've got some responsibility for people. I wasn't married at the time, so I didn't have a
Mhm.
family or anything like that. So, I
Hmm.
hadn't um, experienced that type of
Being
transition yet
responsible,
either.
sure.
Exactly, exactly.
Right. Huh.
So anyways, so that's where it was. I was in that position for, I think, about maybe 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
Good position, good. Being a supervisor again, that carried me through for most of my career. And then we came to a point where this nuclear plant was actually in the process of they were phasing out some positions because one of the units was actually going to be shut down.
Mhm.
And so about half the workforce in that whole group, which I would say there was probably, as far as full-time employees, there might have been about 1,000 full-time employees there.
Mhm.
About half those folks were assigned to one unit, and the other half were assigned to the other unit. You didn't
Hmm.
really mix too much. So, anyways, at that point in time, it was like, all right, these positions are going to be phased out down the
Hmm.
road.
Yeah.
6 months from now, a year from now, something like that. So I saw the handwriting on the wall. I didn't lose my position, but I thought, I don't know that I want somebody else to be making my career decisions
Yeah.
for me.
Uh-huh.
So I started looking for other opportunities, and within the same company, and not too far geographically from where I worked, there was a another supervisory position that was becoming available, and it was in a, believe it or not, a hydro plant. So I went from the high
Nuclear.
tech
Yeah.
nuclear world to a hydro plant that was built in, well, it was right around, I think it was 1904. It was built in
Wow.
1904. So I was fortunate enough to get that position. I was at that point then I was operations supervisor,
Oh wow.
and
Mhm.
now I became even way more responsible for safety because it wasn't a large workforce there. There were maybe 40 people,
Mhm.
but because you had so few people, and there was only two supervisors and a manager, so my areas of responsibility was, of course, the operation of the plant, which it
Mhm.
was a run of the river
Yeah.
hydro plant.
I mean, how what a shift for you, Harold, to go from the nuclear energy to, I mean, if you just wanted to crop up an image in your head when you said hydro plant, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, you stepped so far back, it's like the water wheel, you know, you
Well,
know.
basically that's true. I mean,
Yeah.
I'll put it to you this way: when I first got there, I felt like I died and went to heaven because it was like we didn't have procedures for this.
Huh.
We didn't, but we didn't have to get sign offs to do this task and that type of thing. So it was kind of like a breath of fresh air. Now, of
Yeah,
course,
was
that
it though
changed.
over time?
No,
Right?
no,
Yeah.
that certainly changed over
Yeah.
time because that
Uh-huh.
was more indicative of the management that was there, more so
Sure.
than just the nature of the beast. But
Yeah.
but the thing about once I got there, now I was actually responsible. Safety was one of my hats. Okay,
Hmm.
I had
So this was in your
safety.
job description
I
now.
had safety, right.
Mhm.
I had safety, I had training, I had environmental, I had
Mm.
all the administrative functions, I had the operation of the plant. We had recreational facilities. I was actually the representative to the National Water Safety Congress
Hmm.
that promoted public safety in power and power generating hydro facilities. So I was the representative for that, and under that umbrella, I dealt with the public, and
Yeah.
not now we're getting into a whole different area as far as
Right.
safety because now it wasn't only our employees that we were concerned about. We were concerned about the public while they were boating, and
Mm-hmm.
fishing
Mm-hmm.
and
And the
using our
environment too.
facilities. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And the environmental aspects was part of my job responsibility too. So
Did you feel the weight of that then, Harold? Do you remember, as a young person thinking, "Gosh, what have I stepped into here? Now I have." I mean, did that feel heavy to you?
as actually it was kind of exhilarating. If
Hmm.
I'd step into it right now, it would probably
Mm-hmm.
kill me. But at that time, I really thought it was great because
Yeah.
now I had all these different things
Yeah.
that I could get involved in, and some of the nice things about it were like the environmental aspect of it. I mean, that went right back to my college major, with the
Sure, your
biology and the
biology.
chemistry
Yeah.
and all that type
Mm-hmm.
of thing. So, I mean, that took me right back there.
Professional fun you were having.
Yeah, I was,
Mm-hmm.
and the employees were just basically the salt of the earth type of employees who just were wonderful to work with.
Hmm.
They were very, very, even though, it wasn't like today's environment where safety is like really in the forefront. I mean, back in those days, you worked safe. These guys worked safe because that's the way they always did it, and
Mm-hmm.
that's how they got to go home at the end of every day.
Mm-hmm.
And these guys really lived safety.
Hmm.
It wasn't just, a flavor of the month or a buzzword or something.
Yeah.
These guys really cared about each other, and I could see that, like when a new employee would come in, they would really take this person under their wing, and they would not allow them to do anything that could potentially be in a dangerous scenario until they had enough experience and these older workers had enough confidence in them that they could say, yep, I've seen Carl do this before, and I think Carl's ready to do this task.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, that was that was kind of sobering to me when I saw that, how these older employees would actually they felt totally responsible for the younger employees who were working with them, and
Sure.
that was another thing that I kind of carried inside me the rest of my
Yeah.
career and the rest of my life too.
Right. And they also I'm sure saw anyone they were bringing on board as someone who eventually would need to have their back as well. And so they needed to have confidence that that person could have their back, so to speak.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly,
So
exactly.
do you remember, Harold, back then, you're not necessarily brand new in your field, but like you said, this was the first job where safety was really an assigned duty. And you're put into a work environment that you've not been in before. Do you remember any of the things that you were learning by way of safety that surprised you that went, I'm sure there were lots, but does anything stand out like, oh man, I never even thought of that as a safety thing?
Well, yeah, I mean, like that was actually the first time. Now, of course, when I was a chemist working at the nuclear plant, I certainly was aware of the like safety data sheets,
Yeah.
that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
now I was responsible for them, for the whole plant. So,
Yeah.
that was back in the day when we're talking early '90s now, where the way you tracked your safety data sheets was you had a spreadsheet and you actually had paper copies of every single chemical, every single you know substance that you
Mm-hmm.
used in the workplace. You had a paper copy there in a book. You had
Mm-hmm.
I had like 3 or 4 books. So yeah,
Sure.
that was something that was kind of new to me, and it certainly made sense that yeah, you gotta have this stuff here. But again, the first time I really needed to work with it.
Yeah.
Was certainly the first time when I ever dealt with OSHA coming in. OSHA would come in for just periodic inspections,
Mm-hmm.
and of course we did have a couple, thankfully not really severe incidents while I
Mm-hmm.
was there, but that was a new learning experience because I had never dealt with OSHA directly like that before.
Sure.
Just the training aspect of it, again, earlier in my career, I took whatever training I was told I needed to take, but now I was actually responsible to look at what the people, the jobs that they perform, do a task analysis and determine, okay, so because this employee does this type of work, they need, X, Y, and Z training. They go into an enclosed confined space, so they need enclosed confined space training. They also need enclosed
Mm-hmm.
confined space rescue training, and what goes with that is
Mm-hmm.
respirator training, and
Mm-hmm.
all these
All the cascades.
yeah, all
Mm-hmm.
these different things that kind of all linked together.
Mm-hmm.
And now that was my responsibility to make sure that that'll happen. Now we
Right.
had, I will say, I was fortunate. Um, throughout my whole career, I worked for a very large company. So we
Mm-hmm.
had corporate safety people that would come, visit from time to time. But we really were kind of like an island on our own. So, we had to do a lot of this on our own.
Right.
So, yeah, as far as actually being, responsible for safety aspects, I mean, as far as the training goes too, getting back to that, and
Mm-hmm.
I was responsible to track the training and make sure that, everybody, okay, you sign an attendance sheet, make sure that, that gets logged in. And again, that was just all spreadsheets and that type of thing. We didn't really
Mm-hmm.
have, anything more advanced than that. So,
Right, right. So when you were doing that work and really kind of finding your feet in safety, you had a corporate safety a department or office, you said at the corporate level. Is that where you went for information, or did you have a mentor at the time, or how were you creating a lot of this stuff on your own, or were you starting to build your network, I guess, of people you'd
yeah,
go to?
yeah, I would say, some things we're kind of in the infancy stage where, we were getting into some new technology. So of course we need new training, some different things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But but this corporate safety group, they were in a role that they were kind of there to drive the higher levels of of safety. But we were still kind of like an island on our own, where
Yeah,
ultimately,
figuring it out.
yeah, ultimately we were responsible. They would kind of like give us some general guidelines, but okay, so here's what you need to do. But that was really
Mm-hmm.
my
Mm-hmm.
and the other supervisor and manager there. It was kind of like our responsibility to figure out how to get it done.
Right, right. Yeah. And so when you were in that particular role, you're operations supervisor now, and you've got a number of years of experience. You walked in with supervisory experience with people. Was it a little less bumpy, or was it bumpy for you because you were the new guy?
It was less bumpy, I would say, because now I had some time under my belt,
Yeah.
and I had some supervisory type training. There was actually one course. I think it's actually a Ken Blanchard course. It's probably even still out there. It's called Situational Leadership, and
Hmm.
that was one of the I would highly recommend, if it isn't still out there. And I'm pretty sure that it is. I would
Mm-hmm.
highly recommend anyone who's a supervisor, especially if you're a new supervisor, if you could take that class, you should, because what it deals with is, well, basically, the title, situational leadership. You can't be the same person. You can't have the same response to every single one of your employees, because what motivates one employee is not, it could actually demotivate the other employee.
Mm-hmm.
And, one way to deal with an employee, some employees need you, they need you, and they welcome you being right there, basically looking over their shoulder all the time. But then you have another employee who they're at a certain level where they would resent the fact if you were looking over their shoulder all the time. So,
Yep.
so what I learned through that, and what I learned through the experience of actually, being a supervisor, was that you need to treat people fairly, but you definitely don't want to treat them all the same, because
Mm-hmm.
that does not work. Never
Yeah.
did work.
One
And
size does not fit all.
no, no,
Yeah.
absolutely not. So when I was in that role there at the hydro plant, I'd say that was probably one of my best learning experiences of my whole career, because I had so many different areas. Oh, I was a budget coordinator too. So, I mean, you think, yeah, okay, you got budget, you got environmental, you got
Mm-hmm.
administration, you got, all the computers, the IT stuff. I wasn't an IT expert, but I was the one who was responsible to make sure, Joe had a computer on his desk, and that worked and all that type of thing. So I had such a large area of so many different things. I I I, I would say at that job, I never there was never a time when I ever got bored, because
Yeah.
there was just
Mhm.
always
Mhm.
something new there.
Sounds fun. It sounds
Mhm.
fun. I looked quickly for our audience who's listening. Situational leadership does still exist, and it's through the Center for Leadership Studies. And so,
Yeah, I think that's the name of the corporation. Like, I think that's through
yeah,
Blanchard. I would highly
yeah.
recommend anybody, if you have the opportunity, to take it. In fact, I was even certified to teach that class, and I taught that class many times throughout my
Interesting.
career.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, what was the next stop on your journey?
Well, at that point in time, here again, I seem to like always kind of like jump out of the plane before it would crash. Okay. I get out of that nuclear plant before
Your job might be eliminated.
people
Yeah.
lost their jobs. And okay, so now I'm in the generating facility, and it's kind of like a lot of companies are right now in the utility business. It's like, oh, we want to kind of like divest ourselves of any of our generation, because a generation, that's a that's an unregulated environment. So
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
the as far as costs and profits and all that type of thing, it's kind of like a very sharp edge, and it's much more competitive. Where in the transmission and distribution area, it's much more regulated. So, anyways, the handwriting was on the wall again of my company was going to sell off all their generation, and that's pretty much the direction it went. So
Mm-hmm.
again, I thought, okay, well, here again, I don't want somebody else being able to make my career decisions for me. So I started looking at what potentially. I always see, that's kind of like a little different philosophy than what I see today. I see some of the generation, you know, since me, like the millennials or whatever. I see them very much more prone to go from one company to another.
Mm-hmm.
But
That is a trend. Mm-hmm.
yeah, it is. But back in that day, and there were certainly people who did that, but there were people who tended to stay with their company longer. And of course I did, because I was there for 35 and a half years. So
Yeah.
essentially, I was looking for what else may be out there. And then I probably moved into the position that I enjoyed the most out of any of them. Now you probably think, well, you went from that hydro plant, you said you enjoyed it. I did enjoy that,
Mm-hmm.
but moving excuse me, moving on to this new position, I actually enjoyed it more. And what that was I actually had to relocate. By this time I was married.
Yeah. Okay.
I had let me see. Yeah, I had both my sons. I have two sons. Had both by that time. We had to move. We moved about 60 miles east,
Mm-hmm.
because now I was working out of the corporate headquarters.
Hmm.
And my response, I was working out of the corporate headquarters, but I was a regional employee. And we had the utility was broken up into corporate group, and then each of the regions. Now these regions I was basically in eastern Pennsylvania, pretty much all of eastern Pennsylvania, other than
Mm-hmm.
one other utility. That was our service territory.
Mm-hmm.
So I moved into a position where I was responsible for training and environmental. I was the
Hmm.
environmental coordinator now for half of the state, and it was,
Wow.
oh, I loved it. I loved that, because now I was, boy, now this is right down my alley now. Now
Mm-hmm.
I'm going out on oil spills. I'm going out, dealing with SPCC plans for substations.
Mm-hmm.
I'm dealing with environmental impact studies of streams, and we're having new construction. So any place in this area, that's my baby.
Yeah, maybe sort of akin in a little bit of a way to what you thought you might do with environmental stuff when your
Right.
your environmental wish job that you had when you were finishing college.
It
What
was.
were you?
It, yeah,
Yeah,
it absolutely
moving
was.
out and about and
Yep.
getting to see different parts of the state and meeting different people
Right.
and
And
yeah,
and even with that, you still have the safety aspect, of course. But then
yeah.
the other part of my job, which is something, see, I found out that when I was at the hydro plant, when I was responsible for safety, I found out that I really, really enjoyed presenting safety programs. I really liked
Mm-hmm.
that.
Hmm.
So this position, I mean, it was perfect for me at the time because it was training and it was environmental. So the
Mm-hmm.
other side of that, the training aspect was I was responsible, and it wasn't just for me to do the training. Although at that point in time, I did a lot of training. I was responsible to make sure that all of the regulatory, whether it be OSHA, EPA, DOT, any of that, I was responsible to make sure that all of that training got done
Mm-hmm.
for our regional employees.
Yeah.
So that involved, rescue training. The vast majority of training I actually did myself. I had some other people working with me. I wasn't a supervisor now at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have anybody reporting to me, which I guess kind of was a little bit of a relief for me too, because I like being a supervisor, but it does wear on you
Sure.
because as you're going through, somebody has an issue, somebody has a problem. Well, no, that's
Mm-hmm.
your issue, that's your problem,
Right.
and
Whether it has to do with the direct work of the day or something personal.
absolutely, that's
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
absolutely, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the personal aspects of it many times were, they were tougher to deal with
Yeah.
than the work type issues. But
Mm-hmm.
anyways, so I had the opportunity to step away, and as you'll hear as we go down the road here, only
Mm-hmm.
only for a few years, but for a few
Mm-hmm.
years there, I didn't have anybody reporting to me, and now I guess I got to see, but by this time now we're at the point where everybody has a computer on their desk. Up to that point in time, computers were,
Mm-hmm.
it just wasn't, like
They weren't common.
they weren't common, like
Mm-hmm.
like the admin folks who back in those days, they were called secretaries. Of course, now that's
Yeah.
not the terminology, but
Mm-hmm.
they did word processing like on the old Wang systems, that type of
Yep.
thing. That's what they used. So now we're getting into the realm of, okay, so now you got a computer, you
Uh-huh.
use that. We got a lot more sophisticated tracking systems for our training.
Sure.
I mean, there was some big steps forward there when we got to the point where we could actually, I could look at one regional office and I could tell you in 5 minutes, in 10 minutes, or probably in 30 seconds, I could tell you, oh, okay, Joe Schmo needs bucket truck rescue training. He needs a CPR first aid training, all that type of thing. I could tell that. Whereas before I'd have to pull out a whole stack of
Right.
papers and look at
Right.
that.
Technology was becoming your asset to be able to do the job.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And there again, in that realm, now again, safety was kind of overarching and all that, because the training, that was all really to,
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
meet safety requirements, and the environmental was to meet safety requirements.
Right.
Um,
You were saying, Harold, when you took this position, you were responsible for training in environmental and safety and DOT, and I think you listed off a few others. And for our audience that's listening, when people who aren't doing the work of a safety job, so maybe it's your boss, maybe you're trying to explain what your work is to someone else. Oftentimes, managers or presidents or CEOs don't really know what fits in that box of safety, so they always think it's just safety. Maybe it's just OSHA, but that's rarely the case. It's more of the experience that you had, and it's on us as the safety professional to be able to educate the people to whom we report to what the breadth and the depth of that job is, instead of them thinking, oh, they're just that annoying people that are just talking about lockout tagout or whatever it is, when in fact you're trying to meet regulatory compliance with so many agencies it makes your head spin.
that's certainly an issue because, as in my role there, I mean, I had to report it all the way up to the whole regional president,
Mhm.
the regional management, that type of thing. And you had to really be able to convey to them, why it was important that we're doing what we're doing. Why is it important that we have these plans for a substation? Well, it's because we have the oil volume there, we have the oil capacity, and this is required by EPA, it's required by the state,
Mhm.
this type of thing. As far as the training goes and safety, well, why does this employee have to do this rescue
Mhm.
training? He's never going to have to do it in his whole life. Well, true, but there is that possibility that they might have to. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was something it was always a challenge.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, interested to hear where this role took you next.
Well, again, I was in that area now. So okay, some environmental and training.
Training. Mhm.
Okay, so now we're going down through. Now we're getting into mergers, and and we're getting into mergers, and one region would, and it was all this was all now still internal to
Mhm.
the same company, but what
But
would
you're
happen?
looking out and ahead like you had been since the
Well,
beginning to say, is
yeah,
there an arterial bleed coming up somewhere where I need to
right,
make a shift? Mhm.
exactly. But now, either fortunately or unfortunately, there were some decisions made where, I didn't really have, I didn't really have the choice. It was basically like, okay, so some regions are going to get together, and this was a painful time for me now in this era because, okay, so you're gonna combine two regions. They're going to be still the same company, but you don't need as many training people. You don't need as many environmental people. You don't need as many engineers,
Yeah.
all this type of
Mhm.
thing. So I went through the period of time here where I had to apply for my own job a number of times.
Hmm.
I
Mhm.
was sitting outside my management's office. I saw people going in interviewing for my position.
Oh, how
So,
stressful.
yeah, that was tough. But I survived all that. I survived all that. But you kind of get that survivor mentality when you go through that, because there's good people who you work with side by side. One day they're there, the next day they're gone. Really, no fault of their own, other
Yeah.
than that position's not needed anymore.
Hmm.
So that was kind of a tough time. But
Right. And what was home life like for you then? I mean, by
yeah,
this time you've got a spouse and some kids that you're
yep,
raising.
yep. That was now I'm thinking about different things and what I ever thought about in my life before, because it's like, everything was just, hey, going, I get promotions and everything was just kind of like going along, no problem, no problem. Now
Mhm.
all of a sudden, okay, so this job, okay, so now you're in this job, and guess what? It's posted. You have to apply for your own job.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was tough. I mean, my wife and I, we had a lot of conversations about, well, maybe you should, look some other places. And I did. During that
Mhm.
period of time. I looked outside of my company, because I thought, this isn't
Who
giving
knows?
me, yeah, it's not giving me
Yeah.
a lot of warm fuzzies.
Uh-huh.
Like I said, I see people who were good employees, and they left. So that
Hmm.
definitely that definitely was a lot of wear and tear on me during that
Yeah.
period of time. But ultimately, what occurred was they basically had like I'll call it an NFL draft, where they looked
Okay.
at, okay, I got this employee, I got this employee, I got this employee, just like the draft. Okay, this guy, Pittsburgh wants this guy, Seattle wants this guy. Well, it was like the corporate training department wants this guy, the corporate environmental department wants this guy, and this other guy here, well, I guess nobody really wants him, so we'll put him at the bottom of the list. And he's like one of those undrafted free agent type guys, okay?
Uh-huh.
But I
Yeah.
was fortunate enough
Wow.
to be
Good
picked.
analogy.
Yeah, I was fortunate
Mhm.
enough to be picked up. Okay, so Harold, now you're going to be in training. Okay, so
Mhm.
now I'm in corporate training, and that's essentially where I've been, ever since. That's pretty much
Mhm.
in a corporate training group.
Mhm. And then were you responsible for all types of training, whether it was like you'd done before with safety and environmental and other regulatory bodies as well?
Yeah, pretty much so, because What occurred was, now I had some other things kind of by this time, in this corporate training group. We were not only responsible for regulatory training, which was like, like I said, the ocean and DOT and all that type of thing.
Yeah.
But we also had a group that was responsible for more soft skills training, like just for instance, like this that situational leadership
Mhm.
that I
Mhm.
mentioned.
Mhm.
So I kind of worked in a couple different groups there because I had some of that experience from the past. Like I was a facilitator. I got certified to be a facilitator
Mhm.
by Franklin Covey. Like
Mhm.
I can do the 7 habits of highly effective people, and
Sure.
some of those types of things. And I really enjoyed those. Uh, but here again now, I'm kind of looking out for myself as time goes by, and
Yeah, you're
I'm seeing some of these soft skill type positions being looked at as, do we really need these going forward? Do we need as many of these? But see, I had the background of the hard training,
Mhm. Mhm.
the
With the
rest.
added benefit of this other thing. You had
Right.
effectively diversified your portfolio.
I did. I
Mhm.
did. Really unknowingly at one point in time, but then certainly consciously later. And
Mhm.
basically, I was asked at one point in time, okay, Harold, where do you want to, we want to keep you here in this group. And this was, again, another reorganization, of course. You want to go like the soft side, or you want to go, the regulatory training. Well, I went regulatory training, and it was a good thing I did, because that soft skills group, they kind of like floated off and kind of
Yeah.
disappeared into the sunset. But I continued on.
Mhm.
I became, during that period of time, then I became a supervisor again, and I welcomed it because, again, I liked being a supervisor, but there was a part of me that kind of, my gut was like, do you really want to get back into this again?
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I
That's a
did.
lot of responsibility.
Right.
Mhm.
But I did, and I stayed in that then for the rest of my career. When I retired, I was a supervisor, and I was responsible for, now now through different mergers and things like that. Now I'm working for a company that has 15,000 employees.
Wow.
Okay, so now we're big. All right.
Mhm.
One of my responsibilities was, as you mentioned earlier, was actually with Vivid Learning, and I'll just kind of tell you a little bit about that,
Sure.
because I was responsible for the regulatory training for all, transmission and distribution, our generation side and nuclear side. They had their own separate training groups. So now I wasn't dealing with any of that anymore. Now I was all transmission and distribution. But I
Mhm.
was still, I was still 10,000 employees.
Mhm. Wow.
So anyways, um, in 2003, our company decided, we go out, we do all this training. Um, we do like ergonomic training. Um, we do things like, some of the rescue training. We do some of the like fire safety. We do, a
Mhm.
variety of things like that. That was
The gamut of safety. Yeah.
just basically it was refresher training. Some of
Mhm.
that type of training wasn't something that somebody actually had to put their hands on something and demonstrate to me that, you can do CPR,
Sure.
just some basic safety
Mhm.
knowledge, and
Mhm.
some certain things like that.
Mhm. The
Well,
theory-based stuff that meets the regulatory. Yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
So how do we do that? How do we do that now without having to have, um, you know training instructors go out? And I think we were covering service territory now in like 6 states, so we're like all over the place.
Wow. And you said, what did you say? 10,000 employees under your purview or something like that?
There were 10,000 employees under
Mhm.
the transmission and distribution group, who
Mhm.
who my group was responsible for giving them their regulatory training. And
Mhm.
I had good, instructors working for me and all that type of thing. But yeah, that was our responsibility. So how do we get this routine refresher training done without having to go out and visit these people and stand in front of them? Well, we looked at some different, platforms. We looked at some different companies, and ultimately, what we did in 2003 we brought Vivid in.
Hmm.
They interviewed us. We interviewed them.
This is
And
long before I was with the company, so
oh,
I've not heard this history, so this
oh,
is
okay.
fascinating.
All
Hmm.
right. Well, yeah. Well, I'll tell you right now, most of the people that are in Vivid right now, they were not, around at that period of time.
Sure, we've grown a lot.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So anyways, so we looked at, do you meet our needs? And yeah, the decision was made. Let's start doing the Vivid
Yeah.
training, online training.
Hmm.
And that was some major growing pains with all that, because we had linemen at that point in time that maybe never even touched a computer.
Sure.
And we had to have, like, just some basic computer training classes so that people knew how to access a computer and use
Right.
it and all that type of thing. And then of course we had to educate our supervisors, and we had administrators. We made administrators who could add people and take people out and run reports in the
Sure.
Vivid system and all that. And
Well, and it was probably really a time also of not only were you seeing right before your very eyes the evolution of technology from where you had started to where you were, but many of the employees were too, because it was you were probably early adopters to online training, whereas people today may have had experience or have experience with the computer or know how to operate their phone and navigate things in a way that people just simply didn't know because of the time.
oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. I mean, this was the first time we ever did anything like this. And most other companies, they didn't really have much experience with it either. And
Mm-hmm.
we didn't really know if this was going to work for us or not, because the thing about it is, okay, so we're going to provide this training. Is OSHA going to even
Accept it. Yeah.
recognize this training
Uh-huh.
as something that's
Uh-huh.
that is something that's acceptable for for whatever. And that
Mm-hmm.
was, I got involved in that with with some OSHA inspectors and things. And we found out down the road that, yes, all of the Vivid content that we had, when OSHA would come in, an incident would occur.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I want to see we need to see your training records.
Mm-hmm.
I tell you, all the Vivid course material
Yeah.
always held up. It worked for us.
Mm-hmm.
And we had it was a very, very much of a success for us using that platform. And I guess the fact that it's 15, almost 16 years later now, that company is still using Vivid as their safety training,
Mm-hmm.
refresher training. I mean, that says something for Vivid. Really
Thank you.
does. It really
Thank
says
you.
something for Vivid. And I will say, just from my own personal
Mm-hmm.
experience, dealing with Vivid, as far as customer service goes, I mean, I dealt with many, many, many vendors and many other contractors that, we dealt with for training programs and whatever it may be. And, and not just saying this, but I've told other people, Vivid always second to none as far as your customer service response, the knowledge of your employees, and just customer service attitude was, second to none.
Thank you for that. My coworkers will be thrilled to hear that compliment, because we do really work so hard on that aspect as being a differentiator
Hmm.
to our clients' experience, to our customers' experience with us. So
And
thank you for that,
right,
Harold.
you're
Y-
welcome. And I'll tell you, that's one of the reasons why, like when I was asked to, kind of help out with a few things here after I retired, I was
yeah.
thrilled. I was thrilled to be able to do that, because I've always been, a great believer in Vivid, and everything that you guys have done. Now there's new products and things out there, things that you know I never really used in my past, but I can certainly see the value of them. And
Right.
just, I mean, your group's a great group, and
The
I'm
evolution continues.
yep, thrilled to be working with you. Definitely.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, for full disclosure for our audience, in Harold's retirement, we've asked him to be part of our focus group. We have a focus group at our company that's made up of safety professionals from around the country. Some are retired. Harold is our one retired representative, and we have people who span the industry from just starting in their career to people who have been in it a long time in all different types of industry and in education. And we're so grateful to our focus group who really helps shape what our offering is going to be without sounding too commercially. The fun part is that we've codenamed our focus group the Avengers. And so Harold, you have a title in your retirement and it's Avenger.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
we're
there you
so
go.
grateful for your contribution to it. But it sounds like you and I both before I joined Vivid, I too was in a situation similar to you where, how are we going to get this training done with all of these employees, without having to hand write all of this curriculum and then figure out how to deliver it to the masses across multiple regions and states. And so just like you, I looked for a solution as well and chose Vivid and was, in full disclosure, a client just like you
Hmm.
with Vivid many years after you had been experienced with the company. But yeah, thank you for that history lesson in that piece. It's interesting to hear how our company came to know you, and now I have the great privilege of getting to know you as well, and occasionally working with you
Sure.
too.
No, well,
So
it's my pleasure, and there's kind of my life in a nutshell.
yeah, that's a pretty interesting nutshell. I mean, you weathered a storm in the same company. But you had all these job changes. You were saying before that different generations change jobs more often. But you're not necessarily unlike them. You just happen to make those job changes within the same organization.
Oh, no, no, you're absolutely right. Like some people say, oh, you were in the same job for 35 and a half years. No, I
No,
wasn't in the
no.
same job for 35 and a half years, and I actually moved, physically like three times
Yeah,
because, it was different areas
right.
and that. So, yeah, it certainly wasn't like, and I do know some people, who have worked in the same job, same location, 40 years, 50 years. But no, I've been around a
Mm-hmm.
lot of different places without a
Right.
doubt.
Right. So, Harold, for people who are listening to this and who maybe are just starting out, um, what what would be your sage advice to someone starting in our career?
Well, some of the things I've seen over the years as far as safety goes is, many, many years ago, it was more of a punitive type thing, like somebody who was a safety professional was basically looked upon as a policeman.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see that so much anymore. Now I see a safety person as more of a consultant and more of a someone who's there to help you, not to hit you over the head with a stick when you make a mistake. So I think people who, aspire to be in the safety realm, they really need to approach it in that way.
Mm-hmm.
I think something that's important for a younger person coming into the safety realm is to actually get out. If you're going to be working with a group of people and you're going to be responsible for, some of their safety. I never like to look at a safety professional and say, you're responsible for my safety. You're not. Each
No.
individual person is responsible for their
Right.
safety, but
Mm-hmm.
a safety representative or a safety manager, supervisor, whatever, they do have some responsibilities, for an area. And I guess some advice I would say is, get out, spend some time with those people, see what they do. Don't just sit at your desk and, you know, fill out reports and, fill
Mm-hmm.
in spreadsheets and that type of thing. Get out and get to know the people, get to know what their jobs are, and you're going to be a
Mm-hmm.
lot more respected than if you're just
Yes.
the kind of person that shows up when there's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So,
That's right. That's right. Yeah, my coworkers often ask, like kind of profile what a safety professional is like. What are their jobs like? Who are they? And my response often is they are rarely ivory tower dwellers, and those who are may not be very successful in their job because you're right. It's so important to understand the workforce, the people you're working with, to the type of work activities people are doing, not to do guesswork about it, but at the same time, it buys you respect and trust with the employees to whom you're responsible for providing the right education and training so they can be responsible for their own safety. And
absolutely.
you certainly can't do that from a from an ivory tower perspective.
No, I've seen that approach. I've seen folks in the safety group that, they're the holier than thou type of personality where,
Yeah.
the only time you'll ever see them is when there's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And then what they're coming out to do is to punish people, to
Yeah.
come out with, we're going to suspend you, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and where that person, that safety professional early on, months before, a year before, or whatever, they could have been out, interfacing with these people and maybe seeing that there's a problem, or maybe seeing there's a work practice that could be done, more safely, and
Prior to.
at
Mm-hmm.
that point in time, make some changes. Then a year from now, you're not going to have to sit in a meeting where somebody got hurt.
Right, right. Yeah. Harold, as we start winding up our time together today, I'm wondering, do you have a favorite safety story, or maybe something impactful, something that kept getting you out of bed year after year to do the job? Or when people say, what did you do, in your career? What's your favorite story, whether it's fun or whether it's something that is really
Well,
motivating?
yeah, I would just say, um, I guess what motivated me more than anything was, when like I say, I really did like to provide training, and I didn't do much of that my last few years because I had people working for me, but it really made me feel good, and it really made me feel like I accomplished something when I did a training class, and somebody would come, some old grizzled lineman who, hates training and did not want to be there.
Uh-huh.
He'd come up to me at the end of the training and say, "You know what? This is boring stuff, but he made it interesting for me, and I actually learned something."
Hmm.
And just getting some feedback like that, that always made me feel like, okay, I guess it's worthwhile doing what I'm doing.
I made a difference for somebody.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
one
Just that
person.
day. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
just
Just
that
that day.
day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I did that, and I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but that day, I did
Uh-huh.
I did what I accomplished to do that day, and that was a good thing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and that is our job, right?
Yeah,
And it's and sometimes it's one person, sometimes it's a whole group of people, and
yeah,
you never know. But knowing that we're laying our hand on that arc, and we're bending it toward a safer workplace and sending people home the same way they arrived is
that's exactly
that's
right. Yep.
yeah, that's it. That's it. Well, Harold, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, and thank you for what you contributed to the greater good in all of our careers, and those 10,000 employees in the East. It's a great body of work, and thank you for sharing it with us today.
Well, again, thank you for the opportunity. It was a real honor to be on with you here today, and it was my pleasure. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And thank you all so much for joining in and listening today. And thank you for the work that you all do to make sure your workers make it home safe every day. You can listen to all of our episodes at vividlearningsystems.com or subscribe in the podcast player of your choosing. If you have a suggestion for a guest, including if it's you, please contact me at social@vividlearningsystems.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.